Okay. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Bleeding Edge podcast. I'm your host, Ralph Benker, and as usual, with me in the studio today, Emil Ogier. Emil, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ralph. Good to be back. Less ferry this week.
Yeah, you're looking very slick, and that's good because we're going to have to move fast to get through the bumper crop of news. Things just getting faster and faster. I don't know if that's even possible, but it kind of feels that way.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say it feels like Groundhog Day. I keep repeating myself, but I feel the same way. It feels like it's doubled this week.
Well, we've got some really interesting stories to cover that I think have some really meaningful impact on the way that people use AI and the way that we actually work. So let's dive straight in. Big news, obviously, from OpenAI. Are they still around? How can they still be around? They are like literally the bumblebee that can't fly, but they do. They have announced another 110 billion in new investment with some named strategic backers. And this is obviously all about infrastructure relationships that are designed to expand compute and distribution. Now, I have framed the round as 730 billion pre-money, while Reuters have described a valuation of 840 billion. It's likely reflecting different valuation maths. But anyway, it's still the biggest numbers that we can imagine. Obviously, not quite SpaceX levels. I think what did we value SpaceX at a few weeks back was something like 1.4 trillion after the deal with XAI. Either way, the signal is pretty unmistakable that frontier AI is being financed like national infrastructure. So this is not software, guys. It's national treasures that we are building. Europe, take note. And following OpenAI, we've also had the news of the release of GPT 5.4. Now, you actually called out that was a leak twice in a week. So that's interesting. They obviously didn't intend to release that, or maybe somebody did. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But it does sound like it's a mature enterprise launch. And there is a Thinking Pro version. There's pricing tables, evaluations, and even experimental long context configuration in Codex. Codex obviously being the coding solution from OpenAI. Now, I have to say, I have been trying to get to grips with Codex over the last few weeks. I just can't find my way outside of Claude Code. So I'm still due to do a bit of testing there. The key difference being obviously that Codex actually operates in a sandbox, whereas Claude Code is connected to everything that you might need in order to do production deployments. And so I just haven't seen the need to get into Codex, but I still want to give it a go. It's got some really good reviews in terms of the code quality. So we'll have to see how that goes. Google has also leaned into real-world workloads. So one of the things they've done is released Gemini 3.1 Flash Lite. So previously, their inexpensive version was Gemini 2.5 Flash. So that's now been upgraded with 3.1. And it's rolling out across Gemini API as well as Google AI Studio and Vertex AI. That's really good news. I've actually just built a dashboard that allows me to select different models, different free models, so that we can do some high volume processing. And Gemini 2.5 was on my list. I had selected that, but it's going to be great to actually upgrade that to 3.1 Flash. It's a real kind of workload. Or shall I say, it's a workhorse. So this thing is designed for enterprise scale. Obviously, the costs rack up pretty quickly when you're using these models with large volumes. And Gemini 3.1 Flash promises to be cheap and fast. So if you're going to be using it for automations, classification, routing, extraction, translation, millions and millions and millions of transactions, then that's definitely the one you're going to be wanting to use. Interestingly enough, I've also been continuing my evaluation of the Chinese models, and they are up to 97% cheaper, certainly than Claude, which is one of the most expensive models that you can use via the API. So I don't think many enterprises are really using Claude for high volume work, but it just kind of goes to show the importance of picking the right model. This week wasn't just about capability and new models. We've obviously had some really interesting drama coming from Anthropic and the work they've been doing with the US government. About a year ago, I think now, actually, it could be 6 months ago, they signed a deal with the Department of Defense, and that deal has now been turned upside down because OpenAI have ridden in on their dark horse and they have signed the deal because Anthropic basically said they weren't going to comply with the Pentagon's requests to give them unfettered access and allow their drones and other autonomous machines to basically rely on the LLM to make decisions without a human in the loop. And so they were kicked out. By all accounts, they are back in again and still having conversations, which is obviously good for them. That's a $200 million deal, which we have reported on previously. So let's see where that ends up. But obviously, OpenAI now the front runner for use with the Department of Defense. And they have actually also signed a what they call a kind of a slightly adjusted contract, which doesn't quite give the Department of Defense completely unfettered access to use the LLMs to make decisions for autonomous vehicles and the like. But it does rather look like it's not quite the same red lines that Anthropic were drawing. And that did lead to a bit of a consumer backlash. So quite a lot of people by the looks of it, have moved away from OpenAI and onto Anthropic. That's not necessarily a good thing because are they paid members? You know, of the 900 million people that use OpenAI's ChatGPT, only about 5% are paid members. So has that just inadvertently meant a whole lot more cost to Anthropic? I think those people probably will move back to ChatGPT. Anthropic does not have quite as generous token allocation for free users. So let's see if that actually sticks. But certainly people have voted, you know, OpenAI seems to be a little bit of the bad guy in all of this. But the reality is, you know, what Anthropic had agreed to already was already quite significant permissions. So I'm not entirely sure that Anthropic is the good guy in all of this. I think if you're going to do a deal with the Department of Defense, you are probably implicated as being a bit of a devil anyway. On the consumer platform side, Meta have said that they are going to temporarily allow rival AI chatbots on WhatsApp. I don't know who uses AI in WhatsApp. You know, it's supposed to be kind of personal communication, maybe for business. I've never actually used the Meta AI that's embedded in there. I think it's a little bit weird. Why would I do that? But anyway, you know, the European Union antitrust scrutiny have said that they need to allow other chatbots in there, and that's what they're going to do. So I don't know how long that's going to be sitting there. It would be interesting to hear from people that are actually using it. And then there's some other news on Meta. They've actually faced a new lawsuit tied to privacy concerns around its AI smart glasses. So they've had such enormous success with these smart glasses. I can't wait to get my hands on some of them. I would really love to to give them a bit of a test. I've tried them on before and they look fantastic. They're not very heavy. And of course, the market has really been very positive about the audio as well as the video. And so the fact that they've now got this lawsuit around these privacy concerns is a little bit of a worry, but maybe not so surprising in the age of AI. The compliance and consent bar has to be higher because otherwise wearables, are essentially recording everybody everywhere all the time. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to get around that. But there you go. Infrastructure companies had their own reality check. CoreWeaver has actually had some interesting news on their valuation because they've announced some big capex plans and the market didn't like that. But Dell, on the other hand, has benefited from the flip side of the same cycle, and they've actually been saying that their kind of core computers and servers business is definitely seeing an increase in revenue, and the market has responded very kindly to them. So the AI economy always seems to be a tale of two halves, somebody winning, somebody losing. And then finally, just to call out that Apple refreshed its MacBook line with M5 chips, and they have now got on-device AI performance. So that's actually very exciting. My MacBook is now nearly 10 years old, so just in time for me to think about getting a new one, because I think having on-device AI performance is what it's all about. And we'll cover some of the reasons why that is exciting in some of the stories today. So, as usual, Emil, anything catch your eye?
Yeah, thanks, Rolf. Yeah, I'd say on the codex front, you're not alone. Anthropic is certainly building up its fan base, hearing more and more people by the day just speaking praises of Opus 4.5 six, it's doing everything they need. They don't feel any reason to leave, and it seems like you sharing that same experience regarding the Pentagon deal. Really interesting stuff. They have had quite a mass migration. Last I heard, there was roughly a 300% drop in new user base activity for OpenAI. So I think they certainly feeling the dent. You did raise a good point there. The models are very different. They've purpose for very different things. For those not aware, OpenAI is built around highlighting sycophancy. And if you don't know what that is, it's models appealing to your nature to give you the right good vibe feelings, to be agreeable with you. And the model's very much designed around that because retail users respond well to that. Coders don't want it. They want something more pointed that'll point out their errors so you can get the job done. It's more enterprise ready. Despite many people moving over, I share your views there, Rolf. I think they're going to be somewhat surprised if they have expectations that the models are going to behave the same way and talk to them the same way. I don't think that's what they're going to experience. I've even seen celebrities put postings out on X, like Kate Perry saying, I've left OpenAI and I've gone to Anthropic. Yeah, I know she's not going to be a heavy user, but in this day and age of celebrities, people notice things like that. So it'll be interesting to see where the trend goes. And on the Meta AI front, that's a really interesting one. Seeing tons of posts on X with users. They apparently have a office in Kenya that does a lot of the work for overseeing what's being viewed in the glasses, and people are forgetting that when these glasses are switched on, Meta have the right to periodically inspect content for future improvements, etc. And these Kenyan users are, they they pretty much saying that they're seeing unusual, uncomfortable events, which include people having sex, showering in the bathroom, amongst other things that really should remain private.
Yeah, this privacy minefield, I think, is one that's set to explode. So remember, this year we are going to start to see pins, earbuds. In fact, I saw the other day a pair of earbuds that have actually got forward-facing cameras. So it's a earbud in your ear, but it's got a little forward-facing camera on it.
Wow.
And so we've got some really extreme surveillance behavior. We've seen so many protests over the years about surveillance cameras, and now we are literally becoming the surveillors. And that's quite an interesting shift. Obviously, this concept of ambient AI is going to be really landing, I think, in 2026 in quite a meaningful way. As we reported probably just last week, even, we're set to see the OpenAI Johnny Ives collaboration actually launch their ambient AI device. It doesn't have a screen, but it does sit there and record audio and evaluate your environment feedback. And so, every time you sit down in front of a computer screen and have a meeting, you have a variety of people's note takers popping up. Everything is being recorded, and we're getting more and more used to it. But are we actually ready for what's coming when our life is kind of broadcast 24/7 to our AI, which is kind of evaluating how to make sense of that and how to give us value for that? I don't know. I don't know what we're going to get out of that. But yeah, it's a bit uncomfortable. And I think, actually accessing people's private lives in that way and that stuff leaking out is going to be the defining consideration of 2026.
And in addition to that, Rolf, it's also quite a behavioral change. We used to recognizing that there's cameras in our, for example, in our laptops. And we know when we walk away, we can close the lid, but glasses are quite different. We're more casual about them. We leave them on our bedside table. There's not an on off switch that's obvious to us. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a bit of a rough patch while we get accustomed to ambient technology.
But it's also going to drive a real opportunity, I think, in 2026 for hardware manufacturers. Everybody is going to be adding AI to their hardware. And that's obviously going to give consumers, hopefully, a reason to upgrade, at least, from the perspective of these brand owners like Samsung and Apple. And so I think, we're going to just see a slew of new products coming onto the market, essentially with probably a branding, much like Intel inside, AI inside. And let's see, I mean, the Apple launch of their MacBook Air M5 and their M5 Pro Max, emphasizing this on device AI performance. That's just a good example, but there's going to be a slew of this stuff. I can't imagine. I don't know if you've ever been to Hong Kong, but if you go to Hong Kong, you will see that there are these tech stores, the same brand, literally on every single block. And they're always packed with people. Now with AI, basically being added to every bit of hardware, I can only imagine what's in those stores. I can't wait to visit. I'm actually leaving to China on Saturday, and so I'm really interested to see what kind of devices are in the shops and stores there. Doesn't seem to have hit Europe in quite a significant way just yet, aside from the Meta glasses and the handful of devices that we've spoken about. But I think it's an entirely different story out in China. So looking forward to seeing that.
Looking forward to your stories.
So why don't you kick off with a news item? What have you got?
Yeah, so big news in the agent wars this week, Rolf. Grok is getting native MCP connectors, and I think it's going to be a game changer for them. First of all, what is MCP? A good refresher. It stands for Model Context Protocol, which is an open standard originally introduced by Anthropic in November 2024. Think of it as a USB-C for AI agents, a secure, standardized way for any LLM to plug into external apps, data, and tools without custom code or needing any risky API hacks. Instead of copy pasting context or building one off plugins, the AI talks to a lightweight MPC server that exposes safe, permissible actions. And it looks like XAI tends to jump onto this quite hard. Late 2025, they added full remote MCP tool support for Grok API, and now it looks like they're taking it mainstream for everyday users. According to the leaked but confirmed Grok settings UI, you'll soon be able to flip a switch in settings connectors and instantly connect to the likes of Gmail, Google Calendar, Notion, Slack, GitHub, Linear, Atlassian, which services Jira and Confluence, Sentry, Bullkite, Axiom, DeepWiki, HubSpot, and CoinGecko. Plus, in advanced mode, you'll be able to point Grok at any custom MCP server URL. Once connected, Grok becomes a real proactive operator. Imagine saying things like triage my inbox, create linear tickets from important threads, update Notion project page, and post a quick Slack summary to the team, all with your explicit permissions, of course. This will be welcome news for Grok users, while Claude popularized MCP with its desktop app and community servers. XAI is baking it directly into the consumer Grok experience. So, no extra apps or servers required, people. It also leverages Grok's real time X data, Colossus scale compute, and now your entire work stack. Suddenly, Grok isn't just chatting, it's running your productivity layer as well. The current status at the moment is that it's rolling out gradually. Not everyone sees toggles just yet, but replies from Grok itself say expansions for Grok Drive and Home Assistant, etc., are already on the roadmap based on user feedback. Bottom line, 2026 is shaping up to be the year that agents stop being demos and start managing your actual digital lives. And XAI just took a massive leap forward by writing and extending the OpenMCP standard. So stay tuned and we'll keep you posted with these second connectors when they go wide.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And obviously, they're playing a little bit of catch up to the likes
Yeah.
of Anthropic and Claude. But this is definitely the way it's going. We're starting to really see the impact of this agentic capability in terms of automating everyday tasks. And I have to say, I've been really enjoying using Whisper. So, essentially talking to Claude Code. And there's a little slash command, which is kind of like write like me. And it goes off and I just have a chat with it and say, please send this file that I've just built to somebody. And it basically just goes off and sends it to them. Sometimes I actually don't even realize that it's sending them stuff. So I forget that, you're just having these chats and not doing the action. I'm like, did I send them that email? And then I have the conversation. They're like, oh, thanks for that email. I'm like, I have to really think about what I was sharing with you there. So there is this weird thing happening as we kind of abstract away from the work, that we are not even always sure what work we've actually done, which is hilarious. And somehow we kind of need to have that three-dimensional tracking of exactly what is going on. But I think that's really great news from Grok. One interesting tip that I got from a really heavy AI user was that he's actually using Grok to summarize best practice for a variety of different tools. And so one of the things he does is once a week, he'll say, find the top trending posts that describe best practice use of Claude Code for building websites, for building apps, for some kind of activity. And what it does is it basically brings back all of those all of those results that have been shared by pro users. And he is essentially using that to improve the way that he basically sets up the system prompts and the various kind of folders that tell Claude Code how to operate. And I just think that's such a great tip actually for anything. So whatever you're trying to improve, there is probably somebody out there that is geeking out, whether it's how to write a book, whether it's pottery, whether it's how to pave your driveway. You can actually use Grok to kind of summarize some of the best practice that is shared by users. And I just think that's a great way of using X.
That's a great tip. It's actually what I do. I use it a lot for weekly to grab the latest trending prompts for Nano Banana Pro, amongst other things. It's really useful. Just wait for the trending topics, see what people like, and get a quick summary, and then play around. It's a real time saver.
And so hopefully with their MCP, we'll actually be able to suck that stuff and publish it to dashboards,
Indeed.
which will make the process even more automated. And yeah, I look forward to that. Yeah, it's wonderful that you track Grok and XAI in that way. Emil, I have to say, I've really enjoyed the kind of incursions with Grok. But it's still not made its way into my kind of daily usage. I have to say, I'm still really relying quite heavily on Gemini for my deep research. I use projects with ChatGPT quite extensively, and obviously Claude Code for everything else and most of my automation. And this kind of brings me to a bit of a personal reflection that I've had over the last week, and some conversations that I've had with developers that are using AI extensively. And one of the things that's transpired is, we're really starting to see the potential demise of apps. And one of the reasons for that is that these LLMs are so capable that actually, why would you go ahead and build an app when you can just run that particular routine or activity inside Claude Code directly? Now, the only reason to do it is most people aren't comfortable with getting into Claude Code, running a terminal, and executing these commands. It's not such a straightforward task. If you are technologically challenged, which many people are, in fact, they just find it quite overwhelming when you move into the space. But what I can tell you is that when I look at a lot of the features and capabilities in Claude Code, for example, it can do stuff that is really, really impressive. And it probably takes over, 90% of the software, specialized software that I've been using. So whether that is building presentations, analyzing data, building reports, automating work, sending emails, interacting with my Excel spreadsheets, it is capable of doing all of those things. And so I really kind of predict the death of vibe coding. As fun as it is, I think that probably 99% of every app that has ever been built through a vibe coding platform probably hasn't seen action. It hasn't been used past 1 week. Somebody thought it was a good idea to build it. They were probably a bit surprised that they could build it in 5 minutes. I mean, maybe a little bit longer than that. But then actually they found that they just didn't need that app. And I think this is the case for so much software development. We've been pouring millions and millions into tokens to actually build features that people just aren't going to use. And this last week, especially in the work that I've been doing with Claude Code for clients, I'm seeing a capability way beyond what probably 99% of users are able to access. And so I think as that reality starts to sink in, maybe the lesson here is, if you do want to build an app, just think twice about it. Push yourself to really think about what it is that, what value you're going to be able to extract of an app in app form. And certainly, if it's a private app, then maybe you shouldn't even bother. You should just be using, a capable model like Claude Code to actually do everything inside the existing features from the command line. It's not maybe as sexy as looking at a nice interface, and that might be a good reason to go away and build an app. But in terms of speed and efficiency of processing, I'm just seeing there's so many apps that I've stopped building because actually the way that Claude Code deals with it right now is so much better than what I had in mind. And the need for that app has just evaporated. And so that's, quite a big shift for me in terms of the capability and really just invalidating what was, a new industry, vibe coding, putting the power of building and developing applications into everybody's hands. But now really what's the point with the capability of these models?
I'm with you, Rolf. The GUI is becoming less relevant. We just want the final product. It makes perfect sense in my mind.
Yeah, so maybe we just need to make it a little bit friendlier and accessible, not so command line centric. And of course, that is what Claude Cowork essentially has done. And, we've seen some really interesting developments from Perplexity in that space as well. So I do think that making it slightly more, let's say, consumer friendly is actually going to unlock massive benefits. So we'll
You,
have to see and watch where that goes. But that's just a bit of a personal reflection on where things are at. Vibe coding is forever changed, I think, at this point. And actually, Andrei Karpathy, in the last couple of weeks, there was a headline that he had predicted the death of vibe coding, presumably for the same reason as what I've just reflected on. I didn't manage to get to read the article. But yeah, things have definitely shifted and you should still build apps. I think it's a good idea, but you really need to test the value because otherwise it's really just a waste of time.
and I think you kind of raised an important point. You said you're enjoying Whisper. I think that is the new interface. Natural language is replacing the GUI. That is the bridge between intent and end product.
Well, of course. And I think how it kind of plays back information is the key. So for me, Notebook LM is still one of the tools that I use most regularly. It's a Google tool. It's really optimized for research, but actually it is the most phenomenal content creation platform. So I'll give you a bit of a sense. In the last week, we've built, my development partner and I have actually built some quite significant specifications for a very large client project to automate their entire operations. And what we've actually done is we've loaded those documents into Notebook LM. If you're on the paid plan, Google do assure users that they don't use that information to actually train the model. So it is safe to load that proprietary information into Notebook LM. And we then generate podcasts and videos and PowerPoints automatically to actually explain the solution back to us. And that's really allowing us different modes of consuming the material.
That's cool.
So it's really powerful. And Notebook LM have actually just launched a brand new video feature. Before, their video feature basically gave you a video based slideshow with a voiceover. Now they have moved to basically feature length presentations. And this is a little bit more dynamic. So they're actually using live footage. Well, I say live, but they're using real footage instead of just basically giving you a video of a PowerPoint. And that is taking things to the next level. I think that feature just dropped in the last few days. So really, really powerful. And of course, you have got some basic control over the branding and the colors and the type of imagery that you want to use. You just have to put that into the prompt when you're actually building the video or the PowerPoint or the audio. And Notebook LM does such a phenomenal job of generating that content. If you haven't used it, I highly recommend Notebook LM to any users. Actually free for up to 20 notebooks and also included in the kind of the Google Workspace plan. And this thing just keeps getting better and better. If you're a business analyst, if you're a project manager, if you are a CEO, if you're a researcher in any form, I think this is one of the hottest applications out there.
Well, Rolf, I'm glad you pointed that out because we can't be everywhere, especially in a market that moves as quickly, and that's why we complement each other. It's an absolute pleasure having you as a partner to navigate this exciting space, and I really mean it. So while I'm busy on X and you using Notebook, I've just subscribed to Gemini Pro, and I'm very keen to get in and use more of LLM, the Notebook. Without further ado, I'm going to move on to a next story, which I just found incredible. The story really is bananas. Fired from OpenAI for predicting AGI by 2027. Now his fund has exploded from 225 million to 5.5 billion dollars. Yes, you heard that right. In one of the most remarkable stories in finance right now, former OpenAI researcher Leopold Aschenbrenner has transformed his hedge fund, Situational Awareness LP, into a powerhouse under a single year. Now, SEC filings show that the fund's disclosed equity holdings have surged dramatically. While most investors chased NVIDIA chips, Leopold made a calculated pivot. Said that the real constraint on scaling artificial intelligence would be power, electricity, and energy infrastructure. His largest single position is now $885 million stake in Bloom Energy. The company specializes in modular fuel cells designed to deliver reliable on site power to data centers. This bet alone makes up 16% of the entire fund. He also built a major stake in leading AI cloud provider CoreWeave and now owns roughly 10% of Core Scientific, a former Bitcoin mining company that is rapidly pivoting to host massive GPU clusters. The fund has been aggressively buying other former Bitcoin miners like Cypher and Bitdeer, repurposing their existing powerhouse capacity for artificial intelligence workloads. The strategy has delivered strong results. Reports indicate the portfolio gained around 35% in the last quarter alone, adding approximately $1.5 billion in value. A sharp contrarian move, Leopold even opened a short position on major IT outsourcing firm Infosys, betting that the powerful AI tools will begin disrupting traditional offshore services work. This is not random trading. He's putting capital exactly where his influential situational awareness essay pointed to, warning that achieving AGI by 2027 would require an industrial scale build out of power plants and data centers. From controversial safety researcher at OpenAI to one of the sharpest young investors in the AI space. And need I remind you, he's only 24 years old. Leopold is living proof that true situational awareness can create $1 billion opportunities. What an incredible bet on the physical limits of AI revolution. And this story is far from over. It's just getting started.
Well, I mean, we've seen a lot of young folks just on the money when it comes to this. And, it just kind of goes to show right place, right time, right level of focus. And actually, um, you're uncapped in terms of the growth potential. That's such an impressive story. I absolutely love that.
And the right research paper.
And the right research paper. Well, and I think, having maybe the strength of your own convictions, just trusting that you are seeing the signal, that for me is one of the things that's so exciting about reporting, on some of the AI news, because you start to see these really fascinating patterns and actually looking behind some of these things, as Leopold has done into the energy sector, but there are countless others that are also experiencing some fascinating booms. I mean, we've just been looking at Dell's reporting of their server market and how that is basically driving some significant performance for them in the business. And this is kind of happening all over. And I think energy, compute, and all of those, minerals and materials that actually are required to build some of these tools. And who knows what's going to happen with Taiwan? I mean, the world is such an interesting place at the moment. Obviously, China are desperately trying to get their hands on Taiwan. They have for quite some time. But as soon as something happens there, we have to realize that quite a significant percentage of the world's compute is still developed through the TSMC plants that are all based in Taiwan, which just don't have the capability at the scale that they're able to produce in Taiwan. So that's going to be a really, really big risk, but a big opportunity for investors that are obviously backing chip makers in Europe and the US and elsewhere.
And that
Because as soon as
reminds
that
me of that
capability
interesting
comes
story
online.
we covered last episode on the toilet manufacturer. For those that might be interested, check it out.
Yeah, that was the Japanese toilet manufacturer with their ceramic skills. Anyway, so let's wish Leopold well on his journey to infinite wealth. I might have to check out his fund.
What else you got, Rolf?
Well, I was actually going to jump into a bit of a story about Microsoft, and it's probably kind of two stories, really. And the first one is that they have announced that they're really now bringing agentic building into SharePoint. It's just incredible for me that Microsoft are actually, quite slow to the party on some of these things. I have been playing around with their capability within Copilot, but I've always found it a little bit lacking, and so it just hasn't really helped me. But I do think it's interesting that they're going to be kind of launching this agentic capability within SharePoint. So it means that you'll actually be able to build out your intranet workspaces. In this approach, will be like a multi-turn AI workflow. It's important because it's all about keeping governed content front and center. So, you can really rely on Microsoft's security, scalability, and, why haven't they kind of come to the party sooner? But there you go. Agents are becoming first class citizens inside the enterprise repositories. And, we're getting one step closer to a report that was launched by Microsoft probably about a year ago now, where they predicted that management essentially will become agent bosses. You will have a swarm of agents that will be doing the work, and there will be key people in the organization that are managing and monitoring those swarms. So I don't know who we're going to be building these intranet pages for. Maybe they will be for the bots, but nonetheless, I think for a short period of time we probably will want to be unlocking some of that corporate data using these agentic tools. So that's really welcome news. Obviously, we have also seen that the likes of Claude Code have access to PowerPoint and have access to Excel, and you're able to build some incredible things using those tools, which is a little bit funny because it's Microsoft's home ground. And now, what we're also seeing is that there is news of the Microsoft OpenAI divorce. And this is a really fascinating story. It's been news for probably about a month, but I've been kind of looking at it. And as of February 2026, Microsoft's AI chief, his name is Mustafa Suleiman, he said that Microsoft is no longer content. Microsoft is no longer content being a glorified landlord for
Wow.
OpenAI. They're now rolling out what they're calling the MAI1. It's an in-house mixture of experts mode. So mixture of experts, obviously, when you push a prompt out to one of your LLMs, typically it has a mixture of experts, so a number of different ways of looking at your data, and it then gives you a coherent response. And that mixture of experts model has basically proven to give us some of the best results. But they're now rolling that out in house. They have basically trained that on 15,000 H100s. The goal is to replace GPT 5.2 in Microsoft 365 Copilot, and they're going to be using their own silicone and their own weights. So really starting to take control of their own destiny. Hopefully, that's also going to mean that we're going to get much deeper integration with the existing Microsoft tools and some features that really do take the Microsoft model to hopeful parity with the likes of Claude and OpenAI and some of the others. So this is an interesting kind of turn of events. We'll have to see what it means. The economics of it are fascinating. Apparently, they are basically paying a chat GPT tax. So the bill was something like 8.69 billion. So every time you write a query in Microsoft Copilot, it's obviously a charge from OpenAI on Microsoft, and that was something like 8.69 billion last quarter alone. So Mustafa has got a big budget to play with because every year, he has the opportunity of saving Microsoft on a 30 to $40 billion bill. So that's kind of nice. But there you go. It is a big draw on Microsoft margin, and I think being able to kind of bank that margin themselves, I believe that that they think it's going to be about a 60% saving. So obviously, there's the cost of building all of this out and having to stand up their own LLM. But they're well on their journey to it, and being able to cut your costs by 60%, that's certainly going to make Microsoft investors very happy.
That is really big news. And it reminds me of the cloud journey, pay as you go models as banks and other big enterprises got on board. They hadn't quite set up the infrastructure correctly, and they were receiving these startling bills in their first phase, the first quarter of the projects. Very much, I can see a similar pattern playing out there. The language in his response he made publicly is quite telling. It sounds like there's might be a bit of friction between Microsoft and then OpenAI over these costs.
Well, undoubtedly. And I mean, it is such a big bill. So it will be interesting to see what OpenAI does to plug the gap and just how long it's actually going to take for them to solve the problem. But I think it's probably going to be, play out in 2026. And obviously, it should mean a much better experience for Microsoft users. It's been a little bit strange that Microsoft have had to piggyback off OpenAI in this way and haven't been able to bring their own technology to bear. So I think this news has been long overdue. And let's see if they can actually build something capable. Obviously, Meta are trying to do the same thing, but it's taken a bit of time. I think about 3 weeks ago, they had released their first kind of version of their LLM internally, but we've yet to still see something coming out of them that's actually useful for consumers. So that's another one to watch.
Indeed, Rolf, I'd like to circle back on that earlier news item covering Apple. I'm going to just drop straight in. Apple caters to over 2.5 billion devices, and they set to deliver private AI to the masses, no cloud required. While tech giants chase ever larger cloud based AI models, Apple is quietly engineering a different kind of victory, one rooted in devices already in our pockets and on our desks. Fresh off its January 26 earnings report, Apple confirmed an installed base of more than 2.5 billion active devices worldwide, a staggering figure validated directly by the company and growing by tens of millions every quarter. Powering this empire is custom Apple silicon packed with dedicated neural engines built from the ground up for blazing fast on device AI inference that keeps everything local and lightning quick. Users rarely leave Apple ecosystem with iPhone upgrade loyalty hovering around nearly 90%. That's just incredible. And cross device ownership creating unbreakable stickiness that turns one product into a lifelong habit. That's loyalty is also supercharged by Apple's ironclad reputation for privacy, a brand promise backed by on device processing and private cloud compute that ensures your data never leaves your control. As AI models shrink through sophisticated quantization and optimization, Apple is perfectly positioned to roll out an advanced local intelligence. With its current on device foundation models already running efficiently on devices with as little as 8 gigabytes of RAM, try and picture the scale. A single seamless software update could push sophisticated AI features to hundreds of millions of users in a single week, reaching more than most AI startups could touch in an entire decade. Zero extra cost to consumers, perfect memory for your files and preferences, and total privacy. This isn't hype, it's a hardware moat that could make Apple the biggest winner in the AI era without ever needing to win the raw model size race. I must admit, Rolf, I think I entirely missed this play. I was so focused, solely focused over how far behind Apple was with Siri and having their and not having their own mature AI lab that I entirely overlooked their hardware moats. And it matters. Might this have been their strategy all along? I wonder.
Well, it's definitely their strategy now. And we can see with some of the releases of their latest products. I think this week, well, actually March 11th, they're going to be shipping their new iPhone 17e, and they've also got their iPad Air. I think they're both priced at about $599 in the US. And they've got these AI upgrades in them. I think Apple is the hardware distributor to partner with if you are building any kind of software, because the distribution is massive. So getting into that ecosystem makes Apple highly desirable. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. They are going to run away with it a bit, especially as they start to bring in some of their ambient AI tools. Obviously, Siri is getting the upgrade with Google Gemini. So that was a deal that was announced, oh man, maybe 6 months ago now. We're just waiting for it to actually land. But big upgrade there, actually using Google. Let's see. I mean, maybe it will be a similar kind of story to the one that we've just spoken about on Microsoft, where Microsoft, insourced OpenAI into their Copilot. Obviously, Apple insourcing Gemini to Siri. Eventually, no doubt, they will come up with their own models. But the ecosystem and the hardware plays is so powerful. It is probably the last remaining moat. Software is no longer a moat. I did actually see that uh, there was a project, somebody had coded ChatGPT with 243 lines of code. The software, we can build any system at any moment, at any time right now. And so, yeah, hardware is where it's at. And Apple is all about hardware, and they're all about
Indeed.
the.
And it's not just that, Rolf. Like they're sitting on a mountain of cash. So here's me thinking, why aren't you keeping up? You're so far behind, you're not going to catch up. Maybe they're just waiting for the winner to get to the top of the hill and buy them out if they're willing.
Well, don't forget, they have started Apple Ventures. Apple Ventures is all about finding up and coming startups that they can actually use to accelerate their own innovation. And no doubt, with all that cash, they're going to be able to put it to good use. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think Apple is definitely the one to watch here, because it's in so many consumers' hands, a real trusted brand. Who else can compete with that? Maybe Samsung. And Samsung's the other one we haven't heard too much about over the last few months. Obviously, they came out quite early with their AI enabled, I think it was probably the S25, which was their flagship model. Samsung, the S26 is just preparing to launch. So they're kind of 2 cycles into AI enabled phones. But of course, they make so many consumer devices. I think Samsung will be the other one to watch. And no doubt, we'll start to see the same from white goods manufacturers. So has AI started to drop into your washing machine, for example? There are models out there that have got some integration, but that's still not everyday kind of feature. So I think we've got a long way to run with this ambient AI and on-device AI. But yeah, Apple's definitely got the lead on that in terms of consumer devices. Should I jump into my last story? I've just got an interesting one.
Is there?
Actually, it's similar to something that I've just built for a client. So I have a client who runs a supply chain business, and they're really interested in what's going on with shipping, with tariffs, with commodity prices, because these things affect the price of the goods that they manage and oversee the production of. But there's a guy out there called Dan Ushman who basically created an application called SitDeck, and it's free at the moment. It's an AI-powered intelligence tool, and it basically pulls 180 plus live data feeds, and it monitors things like conflicts and earthquakes and flights and, can you believe it, nuclear threats, which maybe is becoming more and more relevant every minute of the day. So cyber attacks, elections, shipping lanes, markets, all of these things he's thrown in there. And he's had some really, really big success with this. His launch post racked up something like 2 million views. The reason I bring this up is actually this is possible now for pretty much anybody that has a serious business where you need to be monitoring macroeconomic events. And I've been looking at, what I can actually get my hands on in terms of source data from a variety of Chinese sources. I have this client in China, and actually there are enormous number of APIs. And so I have built the first version of this dashboard that is also similarly to SitDeck, looking at shipping data and market data. And I ran the first scan this morning. I had a meeting with the client, flashed it up, showed them, oh, here is some early test data. Immediately they zoned into some things that affected them directly that they didn't know about. And so the power of these dashboards to basically connect into publicly available data sources and to, synthesize the important information using your system prompt and your context setting, incredibly powerful. These are simple systems to develop. I think it took me probably around 3 hours to get to a working version. And actually, that is live and running. I haven't quite deployed it into production ready mode, but I think that this is probably one of the most accessible, useful tools that people can start to deploy. Take a look at the kind of market information you need. Go out there, find APIs that you can subscribe to, and go ahead and build a dashboard. See what sense you can make of the world.
Sounds good, Ralph. I've also got a tip for our listeners on a slightly different theme regarding your safety. Imagine picking up the phone only to hear your daughter's voice trembling with fear as she explains that she's been in a serious car accident and needs money immediately for bail or even medical costs. This nightmare scenario is becoming all too real thanks to AI voice cloning technology, which allows scammers to replicate a loved one's speech patterns using just a few seconds of publicly available audio. As confirmed by the FBI and its public service announcements and reports from the Federal Trade Commission, voice impersonation scams are surging, exploiting the panic of family emergencies to extract quick payments. In a striking example from Florida, a mother lost $15,000 when scammers used AI to clone her daughter's voice, creating a call so convincing it sounded exactly like her child's distressed cry about hitting a pregnant woman while driving. The recommended countermeasure is both elegant and effective. Families and friends should establish a unique passphrase or code known only to the inner circle. This could be an inside joke from a memorable holiday, a quirky family reference, or any memorable phrase that is easy to recall under stress, yet impossible for outsiders to guess. If a call raises suspicions, simply request the passphrase. A genuine loved one will respond correctly without hesitation, whereas an AI clone will be unable to provide it. So maybe this weekend, face to face over dinner, to privately agree on a family passphrase. This is low tech defense, is proving invaluable in the age of AI, empowering people to cut through digital deception and protect their loved ones from financial pain. With scams growing more sophisticated by the day, creating your family secret password phrase now could be a decision that prevents an unfortunate loss tomorrow. Hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that's a really good practical tip. And it's a bit of a crazy world that we have to think that way. But there you go. If it's that's a really simple way of solving the problem. So, yeah, no doubt that will be a conversation for us around the family table tonight. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our show. Emil, thank you so much for all of your interesting stories.
Enjoy.
And thanks to our listeners for making it this far. We'll see you on the edge.
Adios.